I stood at Ruth's grave and I told the truth. That is what I believed the morning we buried her. I told them she was the most faithful woman I had ever known. I said she walked to that root cellar every Saturday morning for 9 years because she was a woman who kept her house and her soul in order. I said it without hesitation. I said it the way you say things that have been true for so long they feel like scripture. The community nodded. Her grandchildren wept. Her middle son, my husband, pressed my hand and did not look up from his boots. I spoke of the kerosene lamp she carried in her right hand, even in the years when her hands had begun to fail her. I spoke of the frost on the grass in winter, the iron latch, the cellar door swinging open in the early dark. I said Ruth's Saturdays were her devotion, her private order, a widow's discipline made visible. Not one person in that churchyard had reason to doubt me. Neither did I. That is the version I told for years before I found the box. And it is the version I told at her graveside as well. Both are true. One is not the whole story. Before I go any further, if you are watching tonight and you had a woman like Ruth in your life, a woman whose quiet you respected without ever fully understanding it, I want you to write her name in the comments below. Just her name. Nothing more is needed. I read every single one. And if this is your first time here, I would be grateful if you stayed. There is more. There is always more. Click that subscribe button and settle in. This story takes some time to tell right. My name is not important. What is important is that I came into Ruth's household at 19 years old, married her middle son, and spent the first year learning what was asked of me in that place. Ruth did not teach me with words, she taught me with her hands. The way she folded a dish towel, the way she moved through a kitchen without waste, without sound, without complaint. I was young and loud inside myself, even when I was quiet on the outside. Ruth was quiet all the way through. She had been a widow for 3 years when I arrived. She wore her grief the way she wore her prayer cap, always, without comment, without drawing attention to it. I admired her without reservation. I did not understand her. I did not think I needed to. The Saturday ritual began before I knew to notice it. I was told about it by Ruth herself, early in our first winter together. I had come downstairs before sunrise and found her already dressed, her coat on, the lamp in her hand. I asked where she was going. She said simply, "The cellar needs checking, and I need quiet." That was all. I stepped aside. I watched her cross the yard through the kitchen window, the lamp steady in her grip, the grass stiff with frost beneath her boots. She was gone almost exactly 1 hour. When she came back, she hung her coat, set the lamp on its hook, and began the morning without a word about where she had been. I poured her tea. I did not ask. I understood, even then, that some hours belonged only to the person living them. In our community, a widow's private habits were not questioned. The Ordnung asks much of everyone: obedience, submission, the quiet surrender of personal will to the good of the whole. But widows were granted a kind of earned solitude. Ruth had kept that farmstead alone for 3 years before I arrived. She had buried her husband in the cold ground, raised the last of her children through their leaving, and stood at the centre of her household like a post driven deep. Her Saturday mornings were read by everyone who knew her as spiritual discipline, as Gelassenheit made visible, a woman in right order with her grief and her God. That was the frame the community gave it. That was the frame I accepted. I had no reason to offer another. If this story is stirring something in you, if you have ever watched a quiet woman and wondered what she carried, there is a guide linked in the description below for those of you who are sitting with questions you have not yet put into words. Take a look when you are ready. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story like Ruth's tonight, I hope you will share this one with them. Some stories find the people they are meant for. Now, back to Ruth. Back to those Saturdays. I counted her preserves once. 61 jars, one autumn, lined up on the cellar shelves in Ruth's careful hand. Green beans, tomatoes, apple butter, pickled beets. Each one labelled with the year, the contents, sometimes a single word I did not always understand. She worked at those jars from August through October, and by November they were all sealed and stored, and the cellar was Ruth's alone again. I understood the preserves as part of the ritual. A widow who kept her household in order, who planned for winter with the same quiet faithfulness she brought to everything else. That was the cellar's meaning to me, a place of preservation, of Ruth's particular kind of care. She had built that order herself, and she maintained it every Saturday, and I found it beautiful without finding it strange. In the 7th year, Ruth's arthritis settled into her hands with intention. Her fingers swelled through the cold months. She moved more carefully. I offered once to go to the cellar in her place, to check the shelves, to bring up whatever was needed. Ruth was gentle when she refused. She said, "No, that is mine." Not unkind, not firm in a way that startled me, just clear. The way a woman is clear about the things she has decided to keep. I did not offer again. I understood that some parts of a person's life were not offered up for help, however well meant. Ruth's Saturday hour was hers. I respected that. Looking back, I think I respected it too completely. I did not look at it closely enough. But that is the nature of trust. It does not look closely. It simply allows. There were 9 years of Saturdays. I watched most of them from the kitchen window. Summer mornings when the lamp was unnecessary, but she carried it anyway. Winter mornings when the cold came through the glass, and I could see her breath, small and white, as she crossed the yard. Spring mornings when the mud pulled at her boots, and she walked carefully, deliberately, like a woman who knew exactly where she was going and had no doubt about why. The ritual never changed. Same hour, same coat, same lamp, same door. I found the consistency of it comforting, the way you find a church bell comforting even when you cannot hear the words of the service. It told me something was being tended. It told me Ruth was well. 3 Saturdays before Ruth died, I watched her make the walk from the kitchen window one last time. She was 74, slower. The morning was bright, no need for the lamp, but she carried it anyway, and I thought nothing of it. She was gone 47 minutes. When she came back, she sat at the kitchen table, and I poured her tea, and she looked— I have searched for the right word for this many times since. She looked finished. Not tired, not sad. Finished. The way a woman looks when she has completed something that needed completing. I sat with her. I did not ask. She did not offer. We drank our tea in the quiet that had always lived between us, and I thought it was peace. She died 17 days later, and 3 weeks after we buried her, I went down to the cellar to count the preserves. The cellar smelled the way it always had, earth and cedar, and the faint sweetness of apple butter sealed in glass. I moved along the shelves with a pencil and a piece of paper, counting jars, writing numbers. It was ordinary work, grief work, the kind you give yourself to keep your hands busy in the weeks after a burial. I reached the last shelf, the deep one, set back into the stone, the one Ruth had always stocked herself and never asked anyone to touch. I moved it aside to see behind it. There was a cedar box, small enough to carry in 2 hands, latched, not locked. I stood there for a moment. I almost left it. I told myself it was probably nothing. Seeds, maybe. Old documents. The kinds of things a woman stores and forgets. I unlatched it. I did not forget what I found inside for a single day of the rest of my life. Letters, bundled in kitchen twine, both sides of a correspondence. Ruth's careful drafts in her own hand, and the received ones, worn soft at the folds from being opened and refolded many times. I lifted the top one. It was dated a Saturday. The handwriting on the outside was not Ruth's. I knew it anyway. You know handwriting the way you know a voice. I read only the first line. He had written, "Mama, I think of you every week. I hope you are well." I set it down. I stood in the cold of that cellar with the cedar box open in my hands, and I understood that I had watched 9 years of devotion without knowing who it was for. The name on those letters was Eli, Ruth's eldest son, the one who had left the community before I arrived, the one whose name was not spoken in that house. The Saturday walks reassembled themselves in my mind, one by one, like jars being set back on a shelf. Ruth had not been going to the cellar to pray over her preserves. She had been going to read Eli's letters, sent, I understood later, to a neighbour's address, carried to Ruth by a woman who asked no questions and expected none in return. And Ruth had been writing back, drafting her replies in that cold cellar by lamplight, folding them into the box, finding ways to send them out again through the quiet networks that exist in every community, plain or otherwise, where love refuses the boundaries drawn around it. 9 years, every Saturday, 1 hour. I had stitched my own understanding onto her silence and called it devotion to the Ordnung. I was not wrong that it was devotion. I was wrong about what she was devoted to. Before I tell you what I decided to do with that cedar box, I want to pause here for just a moment. If this story is sitting heavy in you tonight, if you are thinking of someone you love who carried something alone, I want you to leave me one word in the comments. Just one. Whatever word is rising in you right now. I read them all, and they matter more than you know. And if you want to hear the rest of what Ruth left behind, including the letter she did not hide, that story is coming. It will be here next week. Stay close. The root cellar reverses itself when I think of it now. The neat rows of preserves, 61 jars one autumn, labelled in Ruth's careful hand, were not the purpose of those Saturday hours. They were the cover for it. The cedar box was the purpose. The smell of cedar I had always associated with Ruth's orderliness now belonged to something else. To letters read and reread until they went soft. To a mother's handwriting growing slower in the later years. To a son's words carried into the dark every week and held there, privately, the way you hold something you are not permitted to hold in the light. The cellar was not Ruth's sanctuary. It was her hiding place. And the difference between those two things is the whole story. Ruth kept the Maiden with everything that could be seen. She did not speak Eli's name. She did not set a place for him at table. She did not ask after him in company, or soften the community's understanding of his absence. She stayed. She submitted. She wore the plain dress and kept the plain life, and gave the community every visible thing it asked of her. And every Saturday morning for 9 years, she walked across that frost-stiffened yard with a lamp in her failing hand, and she kept her son. In the only way she was permitted to keep anything, in secret, in the cold, in a cedar box behind a shelf that belonged to her alone. She yielded everything they could see. She kept everything they could not. She did both at once, for 9 years, without breaking. That is the truth I carried home from the cellar. That is the truth I did not speak at her graveside. That is the truth I am speaking now. If this story moved something in you tonight, leave me that one word below. Whatever it is, that is enough. I will read it. And if you are here for the first time and you stayed this long, I am glad you did. Click subscribe and stay near. There is more I have not yet said. But before I go, if you have ever stood at a grave and spoken the true version of someone, the version you were permitted to speak, the version that honoured them without exposing them, and then carried the other version home with you, tucked somewhere no one thought to look, then you already know what Ruth's Saturdays cost her, and what they gave her. You already know why she carried that lamp even when the morning was bright enough to walk by. Some lights are not carried for the dark outside. They are carried for the dark inside. Ruth knew that. I think, somewhere, you do too. I did not tell my husband what I found. Not that day. Not for a long time after. I closed the cedar box and I latched it, and I set it back behind the shelf where Ruth had kept it. And I walked back up into the morning light and I let her have it still. That was the only gift I had left to give her. We tell the stories that can be heard. We live the ones that cannot. Ruth lived both, kept her house and her faith and her community's good opinion, and kept her son, week by week, in the quiet dark of a root cellar that smelled of cedar and earth, and the particular faithfulness of a mother who would not let go. I think, in the end, that is its own kind of holiness. If you are not yet subscribed, I hope you will stay. There is so much more I have not yet said.